It's my street, it's your street, not the high street. Moore Street, it's a fruit and veg, fish and flower street. Moore Street is our street.
Ring-a-ring-a-rosy, as the light declines, I remember Dublin City in the railroad time. All the years have made me better, the drink has dimmed my brain, as Dublin keeps on changing and nothing seems the same. The pillar and the Met are gone, the Royal long since pulled down, as the grey and yielding concrete makes the city of my town.
The Save Moore Street from Demolition campaign has been collecting signatures here on Moore Street for the last 42 weeks, right through the winter, cold, rain and shine. We have approximately 10,000 signatures at this point. Will be presented to Dublin City Council shortly as well, to ask them to preserve this terrace, these laneways here, and all of the battlefields and battleground site that exists, and to revitalise and re-establish a thriving street market. The British Imperial War Museum has looked at this site, and they have found that it is the last European urban battlefield site that is preserved and existing more or less as it was at that time in 1916, and it's well worth preserving for that reason.
My name is Bronnie Lewing. I would be granddaughter of Jerry Boland, grandniece of Harry Boland and Edmund Boland. And the reason I'm here is we're going to join hands around Moore Street because we are trying to get the government to realise they must maintain this terrace through which the 1916 fighters ran from the GPO through the terrace and out the other end. And if we don't save this part of our heritage, what hope is there for us? It's the only place that is exactly the same as it was in 1916. I went to a garrison meeting in Jacob's factory. That's a school, a DIT now, so there's nothing to show where my granddad fought, but there is plenty to show where they went, how they tunnelled through. So our efforts today are to make the government and everybody else realise we must preserve our heritage and our history, and that's why I am here today to do it.
You're looking at the poster here. This is the way Moore Street could end up. These are all like what we would envisage as being like having the shops with the original shop fronts back on them. The whole terrace from the start here from number 10, where the volunteers entered the terrace on the first day, and they bore their way through up here to number 16, which is Plunkett's, which is the building we're outside now. As I say, all the way right up to here, up to O'Rahilly Parade. These are all due for demolition now under the current plan, and possibly they're up for sale as well. You know, on the Project Jewel, which is the latest development from Chartered Lands.
That was on the Irish Times.
That was on the Irish Times. So there is still a possibility of this properties being sold off, even though they've acknowledged that the national monument from number 14 to 17 is important, and as well as that, of lately, Board Falch have put Moore Street onto the map as having a significance as a tourist trail. However, contradictory to that now, these are still all up for sale. Okay. And yet in the Board Falch plan, we've got them talking about the O'Rahilly Parade down here and talking about Moore Street as an entire terrace.
Okay. And your relation is?
I've got 9 relations that took part. I've none that were in Moore Street, unfortunately, but my grandfather was in Jacob's Garrison and my great uncles were all in the Citizen Army.
Jim, could you explain what Project Jewel is for people who are not familiar with this?
Project Jewel is the Chartered Land loan portfolio, which is about to be auctioned off to the highest bidder, which includes the Moore Street area, the battlefield area. So we have a situation where the very birthplace of the nation, as it were, is about to be auctioned off to the highest bidder and could well then be flipped to another buyer, because that's what's happening in NAMA properties. So our position now is that NAMA must ensure that this area is removed from Project Jewel, that this actually is the jewel in the crown of Dublin tourism, developed properly. So it's very important that the battlefield area, the lanes of history as Taoiseach refers to them, and the street and the houses that we can directly link to the Rising are all protected and preserved into the future.
Well, what's happening today, Mark, is very important. As you can see, the crowd that's here, and we're putting arms around Moore Street and the battlefield area. And basically what we're trying to do is to get this government to wake up and to realise that this is a historical sacred area and the most historic street in the country, as the museum has mentioned, our museum. And there are all these people who care for this street. And this is only the tip of the iceberg compared to the diaspora. Now, we've got the Interpreter Centre and 7 million spent over the GPO. And I can't understand, there's no country else in the world, that we cannot connect that Interpreter Centre via a door to this battlefield area, which should be sensitively done up, so that the diaspora and the tourists coming here could see where our nation was started. This belongs to future generations. I keep saying this. It is not belonging to any one government who are in their term of office. I mean, this is our future generations' history.
Well, I'm here today for the Arms Around Moore Street, just to give it a bit of support. I think it's a fantastic idea. I think this is one of the most historic terraces possibly in Western Europe.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Erica Vale, and I'm researching my great-great-grandfather, Colonel Thomas Joseph Kelly, who was saved from the van by the people who eventually were murdered by the British, the Manchester Martyrs.
Okay, and why is it that you're here?
Well, long story or short story?
Whatever you think.
My husband is taking sabbatical time, and we chose Dublin as part of that for a few months. And while I was here, I thought I'd take the time to finally write his biography, which people have done partially, but they've never gotten the whole story, especially his Civil War experience, and after the Civil War, what he continued doing for the cause in New York City until he died in 1908.
Piece of Irish heritage. So there's any blood in your veins out there?
Hey, why did today happen?
Mostly because tomorrow, all the properties that are in the remit of Chartered Lands and Joe O'Reilly are due to go on sale. We wanted to make an impression that it's not quite that simple. Somebody who buys these properties with a view to development could find they had just a tad of a fight on their hands.
And we are very lucky that nearly the whole area, in the whole street and the back lanes and the backyards are preserved now. There are many pre-1916 structures still extant now. So this definitely should be preserved and become a real proper historical district, both for educational and touristic purposes.
Okay. Why does this place interest you so much, though?
Well, it's hard to tell. I mean, I first was interested in Irish history via Michael Collins, and Michael Collins was, of course, a minor figure only in the 1916 Rising, but he was among the men here on Moore Street in the last few hours of the Rising. So I happened to meet people who were starting the campaign to preserve originally number 16 Moore Street. That was in the early 2000s. And I joined the campaign at that point, and I've been here until then.
You know, it's about saving what is essentially the heart of Dublin. And it's up to the Irish people to come out and stand and save it. You know, what are we going to leave for our children? If you look along the street, you see the only sign of history is a little small plaque hidden high above the street where nobody will see it. Around the corner you'll see the doorway where the leaders of 1916 broke through to get into the buildings, and it's covered up with a billboard.
They're saying here that we need another shopping centre on Moore Street. Clearly she's just after closing down. I mean, that's been here a long time, so if you ask me, it's all bull.
What happened here today?
Today was an event called Arms Around Moore Street, and as you can see from the t-shirt, the first event took place here in April 2009. It's a long-running campaign to protect and preserve the buildings which are central to the birthplace of the Republic. One of the main facets that influenced us was the idea that in the proclamation, which was issued a little over 99 years ago, there was one very important phrase which talked about the unfettered control of our own destinies. And despite the fact that the Arms Around Moore Street is a demonstration of people power, we have had the Taoiseach and the President, all of them agreed that these are battlefield sites, that these are the laneways of history, and yet we seem to be still subject to the influence and power of developers who wish to desecrate really what is a sacred site. So from our point of view, it's a question of, will democracy triumph over corruption? And that's why we're in the streets today, particularly as we draw towards the centenary of 1916. It's a very, very important battle. It's about people versus corruption, speculation.
We were here today for Arms Around Moore Street. I'd say almost 1,000 people turned up today, and we lined all around Moore Street, down Moore Lane, and it's to protect Moore Street, and it was a symbolic gesture to say that we will not surrender, and we will keep this campaign going. There has been some inroads in terms of protecting some of the buildings, but all of the buildings need to be protected. The whole row and the whole area is a national treasure. It's a last battlefield, and people are here to support that.
It's a great coming together of people who have as a primary interest the notion of preserving history and historical artefacts, which is what these buildings are. I mean, they're so important to the story of 1916. Almost everything else to do with 1916 has been obliterated. The various garrison sites, houses particularly associated with 1916 and so on. And no regard has been paid to preserving these things in the way that they would have been preserved in other countries, like in France, for instance, or in the United States, or in Britain. And here we are, we're supposedly an independent, sovereign country. They call it a republic, which I dispute strongly. But in this republic, it is possible for a speculator, for a land developer, to get his hands on a national monument, which seems extraordinary to anybody with a bit of common sense. But that's the case in Ireland, that the right to private property takes precedent over all other things. And so here we are on a Sunday, still trying, 15 years later, to prevent this dreadful thing from happening and to preserve something of real value and real significance to future generations of the Irish people.
And you have your own relative that was involved in 1916?
My grandfather was, he was first of all involved in the lockout. He was a tram driver, and he went from Liberty Hall as a lockout man to Boland's Mills as a volunteer. He collected his gun in Howth. And later turned up not once but twice at Ringsend Bridge. He turned up on the Sunday, which was the original starting day for the revolution, and then he was back on Monday when the revolution was back on again. So in a way, my involvement here is always to represent a man who isn't here to represent himself, and to represent his wife Catherine, my grandmother, who was even more of a rebel, I believe, than my grandfather was. And these people they can't speak for what is being done today, so it's incumbent on the rest of us to do that for them.
Rays and songs and stories, heroes of renown, are the passing tales and glories that once was Dublin's town. The hallowed halls and houses, the haunting children's rhymes, are part of what was Dublin in the railroad times. Ring a rosy as a light declines. I remember Dublin city in the railroad times. Oh, my name is Sean Dempsey, as Dublin as can be, born hard in Lanes and Pimlin. and houses ceased to be. My tradie was a cooper, lost out to redundancy. Like my house that fell to progress, my trade to memory. And they called it Peggy Dingham, as pretty as you please, a road and child of May.